Good morning and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims! Yes, we're back once again to break this thing down verse by verse, breaking it down into logical, factual statements in English so we can understand who is Allah, what does he intend with his book here, and more important to us is what is the plan for us non-believers in our lives today. What does he want from his Muslims? What does he want them to do to us? So let's get started. Before we get started, as I always do, I'm going to tell you now, if you have any doubts as to my factual accuracy or any of the claims that I'm about to make, please buy and read one of these before you come at me, bro, and then you'll realise after having done so that every single word I'm going to say now here is 100% accurate to what Allah says in his book and what Muslims believe in the world today. So, if you are paying attention and you saw the last episode, you will remember that we went through the small insurgents of the desert being led by Talu, who Allah has kind of stolen from the kingdom of Israel. Talu was King Saul, the previous king of Israel. Then they went through some faith tests, which unfortunately they failed. And Allah said, only those who I want to win, who have only worshipped me, Allah in the book, will win and be able to beat Goliath. Unfortunately, Talu, who he has picked to lead his troops, actually was worshipping another god before, so he didn't mean him. And the person he willed to beat Goliath and win the day was actually the next king of Israel, King David. So King David came out of Israel, slew Goliath and his armies, went back into Israel, and the insurgents led by Talu kind of went, we didn't die, and they were left and went home. So the end result was Israel still stands, Goliath is now dead, and the insurgents had obviously buggered off into the desert. And that is where we continue our story from. So, let's get started. 181. Goliath's defeat is the sign of Allah. The fall of Israel was the sign of Allah. And we must all participate to them if you wish to become an apostle of Allah. These apostles will be endowed with various gifts, and the apostles will be more powerful than even Jesus. Nations warring is the will of Allah, a punishment for apostasy. If Allah wills it, all war and evil stops, but Allah does what he will do. End of verse. So this is a fucking juicy one, isn't it? If you'll excusez-moi ma français. We start off by hearing more about Goliath, which, as we went through, wasn't actually killed by Allah and his small insurgents led by the stolen king Talu. They didn't do anything. They just watched and then went home. So Goliath's defeat is apparently the sign of Allah, even though Allah's chosen king didn't kill him. The person who killed him was the king of Israel, King David, who made this star, which is called the Star of David. He's the guy that put that star on the flag of Israel back then in the time of Moses. But what Allah is saying here is that battle, Goliath getting killed by David, the king of Israel, even though the king of Israel, David, doesn't worship Allah and is an enemy of Allah, that defeat of Goliath is a sign of Allah. That's what he's saying. And the fall of Israel is a sign of Allah. So everyone must participate in these because they're the signs of Allah. You know, you must have seen the signs of Allah is what this means if you wish to become an apostle of Allah. Not everyone does want to become an apostle of Allah, like this is kind of supposing, but let's just, nothing to see here, go along with it anyway, as if we're a Muslim reading the book. He then goes on. If you wish to become an apostle of Allah, you have to participate in these signs. The apostles of Allah will be endowed with various gifts, and these apostles will become more powerful than Jesus. So, if we break that down, the apostles of Allah are like the messengers, you know, like Moses, Abraham, Jacob, Ishmael, and Muhammad, and also Jesus. Jesus being the most powerful of all of these, by the way, even in the words of Allah, he says, the most powerful of these apostles is Jesus. Let's just remember that for a separate point later on. But he says what he's going to do. Allah is going to give these apostles various gifts. You know, like if you've seen Heroes, there was a series called Heroes on CBS ages ago. And they have various gifts. And one of these gifts is like a guy can shoot fire out of his hands. Another one can read minds. That's what Allah is saying here. He's saying if you worship Allah and he makes you an apostle of his, like a pusher of the Quran worship, he will give you some gifts like mutant powers. You know, you'll be able to do knives out your hand like Wolverine. He's not very particular about describing these. He just says gifts that he will endow on you. Then he goes on. nations warring is the will of Allah. Now that is a quote. Nations warring is the will of Allah. That's what he says. And he says that the war is because a punishment for apostasy. So let's just keep in mind here, before we go on, Allah's will is warring nations. Even though he calls it a religion of peace, his will is warring nations. Not only that, but the warring nations is the punishment for apostasy. So he, Allah in the book, is causing these nations to war and kill each other as a punishment for not worshipping him enough and doing his Quran stuff and fearing only Allah. Even though the sign that this is true that he just told us about is the fact that the king of Israel, who's never worshipped him and is his enemy, killed Goliath outside of Israel and then went back in. That's what this means. He rounds out the verse by saying, if Allah wills it, if Allah wants this to happen, all war and evil stops. But Allah will do what he will do. End of verse. So, breaking it down, Allah has clearly said there, even though Muslims don't like to admit this fact, this is in the words of Allah himself. Warring nations is the will of Allah, 1. He's doing this because they don't worship him, 2. And 3, if Allah wills it, all war and evil in the world stops dead. So Allah is taking the credit for all war and evil in the world in this line. That is a fact. I'll read it to you again. If Allah wills it, all war and evil stops, but Allah will do what he will do. So this is literally Allah saying in his book to you, the reader, and all Muslims, Allah is the cause of all war and evil. If he wants it to stop, he can just stop it like that. Without any effort, he can just click his fingers and it will stop. But he doesn't want to because you're all apostates and evil. And Allah will do what he will do, i.e. I know you don't like this, people. You don't want to be at war. You don't want to be beset with evil. You don't want to have crime and rapes and murders and diseases and curses. You don't want any of this. You just want peace. But no, Allah will do what he will do. So no, you're not getting any of that. You're getting evil and war, and that's just the end of it. That's what this means. I'll carry on. 182. O Muslims! My bounties are well sufficient for your completion of my orders, to complete my genocidal end times prophecy, and the day arrives when all the women are slaves of all the men laid dead. Those whom rejected it are evil ones indeed. End of verse. So you'll excuse my having a bit of trouble there with my own writing. I'm obviously completely retarded when I'm writing this. But we got through it in the end, and the basics of this, if we break it down, is O Muslims is the start. So Allah is now ignoring everyone else in the world. He's only speaking to people who actually believe all this stuff and worship Allah only. And he says, my bounties, i.e. me, Allah in the book is saying to you, O Muslims, my bounties of the entire world as a gift to you for killing the Jews is well sufficient for your completion of my orders. So what Allah is saying is, Muslims, go and kill the Jews. You're not getting anything more than I've already given you. It's in the world for you to take. I've given it to you there, and it just so happens that other people currently own it, or it's in other countries that don't believe in Allah, you know, the guys we're going to kill. So go and get the stuff you need from those countries, kill them and take their stuff and their wives and children as slaves and all their money, and then complete my genocidal end times prophecy using the stuff in the countries that you just took over. And when the day arrives, all the women are slaves and all the men lay dead. That's how you're going to know the end times prophecy day has arrived. Because, and I quote, all the women are slaves, and all the men lay dead. This is Allah talking to his Muslims. You will know, O Muslims, when my genocidal end times prophecy is completed, and you are then, you're done with the task, the bounty that I've set you, and how you will know this is complete is because every single woman will be a slave, and every single man will lay dead with his head cut off. And then he finishes up by going, those who reject this are evil ones indeed. So if you don't like this idea that the end times genocidal prophecy is going to be complete with every single man on earth dead and only women left in the species and all the women in chains being slaves of Allah, if you don't like this, you are the evil one who Allah will send his Muslims to come and kill in the end times prophecy. So it's almost like a logical fallacy there, because if you think about it, he needs men to kill the Jews to complete the end times prophecy, but then the end times prophecy means all the men have to be dead with their heads cut off. Are they going to kill themselves at the end? Well, they do actually do that. There is a lot of Allahu Akbar, killing yourself. but that's just me supposing based on logic. There isn't a lot of logic in here. Allah wrote it, not me. That's what it says. I'll carry on. 183. Allah, there is no God. That's literally what it says. 183, which is verse 255 in the Quran of the Muslims, and I quote, says, Allah, there is no God, but the self-sufficient man who lives, self-subsisting, who never sleeps. He owns everything upon heaven and earth. None can prevent his finality nor interfere in his tasks. Are you getting what I'm putting out here? Like, Allah has literally just told you in his own words, in his Quran of the Muslims, and I quote, this is Allah speaking to his Muslims, Allah, there is no God but the self-sufficient man who lives, self-subsisting, whom never sleeps. He owns everything upon the heaven and earth, and none can prevent his finality nor interfere in his tasks. So Allah is literally telling his people here there is no God, even though earlier he claimed he was the God, and he said other gods are bad and you'll die if you worship them. He's now actually saying there is no God, including him. He's saying he is a man who lives, who is self-sufficient, self-subsisting, and who never sleeps. So he is basically saying he's actually a human at this point, who never sleeps and is self-subsisting and self-sufficient, who is not a God, because he literally says, and I quote, there is no God. That's what's in here. 100%. And if you don't believe me, buy a Quran of the Muslims and read it, and you'll find out Allah himself has just said, there is no God. End quote. I'll continue. Allah, there is no God but the self-sufficient man who lives and breathes, self-subsisting, one who never sleeps. He owns everything upon heaven and earth. None can prevent his finality nor interfere in this task. So, what I think he is saying here, although it's not expressly described in here because it's very scant on details, you know, Allah can't write very well. He doesn't know too many words. None can prevent his finality. So what he's saying is this dude who lives and breathes and is self-sufficient and knows everything and never sleeps, that's him. He is going to die as well. His finality means he's dead as well. So after all the men die, the women survive as slaves. He dies, according to himself. And none can interfere in this task, even though, as we know, plenty of people interfere in this task, myself included. Then the verse goes on. No one lives nor travels his domain unless by his will, and he knows every knowledge in all moments. Allah never tires of his curse upon the non-believers, because he is the supreme leader of leaders, Lord of all. End of verse. So, if we break that down, ladies, gents and Pikachus, and this is starting to get towards a good bit here. No one lives nor travels his domain unless by his will. So that is clearly saying nobody apart from his guys do anything. Like, his will must be controlling everyone who's against him as well then, if this is to be believed. No one lives nor travels his domain unless by his will. So what Allah is saying to his Muslims and us there is even the people who are opposed to him, the guys who he's trying to kill, Israel, me, Christians, apostates, everyone, all the ex-Muslims, he's actually, mind controlling them in order that they travel his domain in the way that they do. Everything they do is his will. And he knows every knowledge in all moments. Apart from we know he doesn't know all things and have knowledge in all moments, because he chose Talu just a minute ago to kill Goliath, but actually David killed him. So he's proving here, and I think the reason he's repeating this, because he said this before in previous verses, the reason, O reader, that he is saying no one lives nor travels his domain unless by his will, because a load of stuff just happened which wasn't his will, and his insurgents didn't even do the killing of Goliath. So they went off, they didn't get into Israel, they didn't get the Ark of the Covenant, they didn't even kill Goliath, they failed 3 faith tests in a row, then buggered off without a victory. So they're sitting there scratching their head going, this guy's actually full of shit, isn't he, this Allah guy? I don't know why we're worshipping him, he's rubbish. And Allah is saying, no one travels or lives apart from by my will. So he's trying to convince his Muslims, despite the fact that they haven't fucking done any of the stuff that he's prophesied and they didn't win a battle, and he didn't even let them have a drink beforehand, so they failed the faith test there. He's saying to them, no, I don't care what you think, O Muslims. My will is the reason everything happens, okay? Honest, bruv. Trust me, bro. That's what Allah is saying here. Then he rounds out the verse by saying, Allah never tires of his curse upon the non-believers, that's you and me, because he is the supreme leader of leaders, the Lord of all. Apart from, he wasn't the Lord of Goliath, because Goliath wanted to kill him, and would have killed him and his soldiers, apart from Israel sent out David with his sling and he killed Goliath. So none of this stuff is... We can't make this true if we only use the Quran as a source. That's what I'm saying. This book, the Quran of the Muslims, demonstrates itself to be false. You have to literally take a leap of faith off the cliff of logic into complete ignorance and torment and confusion if you in your head want to believe this as true. And we know that because Allah is literally telling us here. And then if you don't like hearing about the fact that he's talking rubbish, he says to his Muslims, Allah never tires upon his curse on the non-believers. David just killed Goliath. He's not a believer. He's literally gone back into Israel to worship the God of Israel and not you, Allah, who he's an enemy of. So how is your curse upon the non-believers affecting that guy? It's not. He's winning his battles. His great kingdom survives. You've just run away with your insurgents and failed and defeated. So it seems like your curse on the non-believers is kind of fictional, Allah. Just saying, you know. He is the supreme leader of leaders, the Lord of all. I think we can demonstrate today that that's not the case. He's certainly not the Lord of me. Although I do recognise that Allah is a true, real being. Allah is Satan. That's the reason I recognise him as true. He is the spirit of evil. And his curses only affect those who don't have the protection of God. I.e. not myself. I'll carry on. So we reach the last verse. I think you'll enjoy this one. 148. Be not compelled by other religions. No truth stands out in them. Their truth is only error. Who doth reject the other worships and submits to Allah's domain, the most trustworthy, shall be held in a hold which never breaks, as he knows and he hears all things as his control. End of verse, end of reading. So let's break that last bit down. This is one of my favourite bits. It's not the top bit. Like I said, the bits where he shouts at his Muslims, let's kill the Jews. I enjoy those bits more. But this is very interesting how he starts off by saying, be not compelled by the other religions. No truth stands out in them. So he's talking about truth all of a sudden, even though he never has in the past. Now that he's had his experience with seeing David come out of Israel and killed Goliath, and he's been mentioning Jesus, so presumably he's had an experience with Jesus, that is where the truth element has come into his thinking, and now he's putting that into his own story. And he's saying, be not compelled by the other religions. No truth stands out in them. Their truth is in error. Which, if you think about it, truth can't be in error. Error means not true. Truth means not in error. So the error in the truth here is that once again, Allah, you're writing like an illiterate fucking 7-year-old and you're not making much sense. But that's not the best bit. The best bit is, who doth reject the other worships and submits to Allah's dominion, the most trustworthy, shall be held in a hold which never breaks. Now, Allah is trying to tell me, now the reader, and you, that he is the most trustworthy, even though we know and he has demonstrated, just a minute ago he was lying and wrong, but throughout the book, pretty much every episode, we catch him out lying twice, 3 times, 4 times, loads of times. He lied to Moses in the beginning. He lied to Adam, the first ever man, by telling him, you will be above the angels. 10 minutes later, Adam is below the angels, on the surface, starving, looking for food, having to worship Allah. So Allah is not trustworthy, which is why it makes me laugh when he says, who doth rejects the other worships and submits to Allah's dominion, the most trustworthy, no you're fucking not mate, shall be held in a hold which never breaks. And that's also a lie, as we know, because when you die, Allah's hold over you is no more. Unless he has convinced you that he's going to do this grave torture and you actually believe that, then you will think his hold on you will last forever. But what I think is, as most of the things he has previously claimed have been demonstrated to be false, and he does tell a lot of lies, and most of the things he promises do not happen, I think we can safely say He will not be holding anyone in a hold which never breaks unless they are alive and they are brainwashed by the Quran of the Muslims. As he knows and hears all things, as is his control, is how he ends the verse. And what he's saying there is, if you don't believe me, I know all things and I hear all things. I control all things. Honest. Trust me, bro. That is what Allah is saying here. So in conclusion, we know this entire page of verses from Allah speaking to you and his Muslims and me, the entire thing is him trying to make excuses for the fact that his previous prophecy in the last episode, where Talith was supposed to lead his Muslims to defeat Goliath and then invade Israel and beat them, didn't fucking happen. So now he has to say, actually, all evil and will is my command. That's what he says. All evil and war in the world is up to me, actually, Allah says. And I could stop it like that if I wanted to, but I don't want to unless you do this. So get to killing those Jews, then there'll be no war and evil. All the men will be dead, all the women will be slaves. Allah will be the king. Yes, sir. That's what he says here. Then he says, Allah, there is no God. Gives us a bit about the man who lives, who never sleeps, who owns everything. And how nobody can beat this guy or prevent it, so don't even try. He's bullying people. He's trying to put them off opposing him there. And then to make sure his religion is protected, which I feel this entire thing is him trying to protect his assets in his religion. To make sure nobody thinks about opposing him from his Muslims, because obviously they're seeing this guy's not what he claims to be, and he talks shit most of the time. So his own Muslims are told, don't be compelled by other religions. There's nothing true in those religions. And if you reject those other worships and you accept Allah, me in the book, the most trustworthy person is what he's telling them. Like, why would you have to make a point of saying, if you're God, if you can read people's thoughts and you can put thoughts in their head, if you can see the future, why would you need to actually say in a separate line to your own devout Muslims, I am trustworthy, trust me, bro, and then say, I know all things, I hear all things, my control is absolute, and if you don't believe me, you're fucking dead. End of reading. So, that's the end of the reading and the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. Later on at 4:15, we'll be carrying on listening to more of the inane but highly humorous ramblings of Allah, of the Quran, of the Muslims. And we'll be having a lot of fun when we do that. So, for now, hope you enjoyed that. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. I just have no idea how Muslims read this book, watch these videos, and don't just think Allah's full of shit. But mind control does funny things. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed that. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.